And I was about to ask, is somebody going to press record? So great. Okay, we'll just let people come in for a minute and sit on mute whilst the attendees come in. Thanks. Hi, good morning, everybody. Good afternoon, even. I think most people have joined, a few people still joining, so we'll get started now. So welcome to this webinar hosted by the GPA, NDEV and Smart Communities Coalition with our partners from SMV and Solar Freeze and GIZ. We're going to be talking today about energy for small businesses in displacement settings. And for those of you who don't know, the GPA stands for the Global Platform for Action for Sustainable Energy in Displacement Settings. And as you can see from this first slide, these are all the institutions that are involved in the GPA and the sponsors in terms of our financial aspects. So if we jump to the next slide, please. So just a little bit of housekeeping. In the chat function, please write down your name, organisation and location and post your questions at any moment during the session, and we'll collect those for the end of the presentations during our panel. And of course, remember to select everyone when you post your questions and comments instead of just hosts and panelists, so that everybody can see the questions that are being asked. So we jump to the next slide. And here we see our agenda for the day. So it's just a couple of welcome remarks from myself and Claudia, and then we'll delve into our 3 case studies, and then we'll have a panel before closing. So if we go to the next slide. Great. So I should have said this at the beginning, but hello, everybody. I'm Sarah Rosenberg-Jansen. I work at the University of Oxford and the GPA. And one of my special sort of research interests is actually energy for enterprises. We call it like this because it's a bit of a missing space in refugee and displacement settings. I think everybody really knows about household electricity, household cooking. A lot of people are specialists in community facility energy, and of course, energy for enterprises and operations. But this energy for enterprises is also extremely important, and it's the type of energy that's being used by small businesses for productive use and income generating opportunities within camps and within settlements and within urban areas as well. And these enterprises can be within households, or they can be outside of households, and they can be both formal and informal. This slide just talks a little bit about the types of displaced enterprises that you might see. So mobile phone charging shops, restaurants, small shops and traders, as well as larger scale businesses for productive uses that might be in the agricultural space and the agri-processing or hospitality space. I think that it's important to acknowledge that while some of the smaller businesses are able to use off-grid technologies such as solar home systems or solar lanterns, for larger productive uses of energy, you really start to need larger amounts of power. And that's an important distinction. Although today we'll talk both about micro businesses, which are very small, often one-person businesses operating very informally, and the more traditional SMEs, as well as the larger scale businesses and productive use needs. And this term energy for enterprises is really the umbrella term that we use. We see a few pictures of the types of traditional technologies and spaces in which this energy is used. For anybody who'd like more detail on the definitions and the space around this sector, there's actually a paper by the HEED project at Coventry University with my co-author Hajar Al-Kado, and the reference for this paper is just down there at the bottom. I'll post that in the chat in a minute. So if we jump to the next slide, please. That was all from me. Just welcome everybody. Really excited to get into some of the case studies. And I'd just like to hand over to Claudia Schwartz from SCC, the Smart Communities Coalition, to really hear a little bit about what energy for enterprises looks like from her perspective, and start us off. So thanks, Claudia. Over to you.
Thanks very much. My name is Claudia, as mentioned, and I'm one of the USAID co-chairs of the Smart Communities Coalition, which hopefully you are all familiar with by now. So I'm pleased to be able to share this white paper today that we've been working on for several months. It was actually conceived and executed as part of a capstone project of a team of Columbia University graduate students, I think some of whom may be on the call today. And it was basically based on the original recognition that, you know, many humanitarian energy interventions are based on provision of free products and services. So this research focused exclusively on market-based interventions, and was intentionally limited to household solar and productive use, as opposed to mini grids, to allow for a degree of cross comparison, given that there's such variation in mini grid regulation in various countries. So basically the team worked to collect information from all projects of this type with any publicly available information. So they ended up with 13 projects that fit these parameters. And they combined desk reviews with direct interviews with the project promoters. And ultimately they found that these projects could by and large be classified into 3 categories: direct grant financing to suppliers, second, market development and technical assistance activities, and third, demand side interventions. So each of these categories is defined in the white paper, and an exemplifier project is described. And then also the details of all 13 projects analyzed are available as an appendix. So just to highlight a couple of the key findings, the paper demonstrates that there's a high degree of variability in local contexts, as I'm sure you all know, in particular in terms of ability to pay, which is why it's so important to tailor the intervention strategy to the local context. And so delving deeper into that, the paper finds that demand side interventions, or also known as demand side subsidies, often have initial success, but may have long-term risk because they don't fundamentally alter the economic landscape. So there may be a reversion to prior spending patterns when the donor program ends. So the paper emphasizes that these interventions should always be paired with interventions that address market disruptions, so that they can be used to stimulate initial demand, but then continue sustained sales in the future. But then the paper also finds that direct supplier funding to project promoters, for example, through helping to set up sales points and networks and so on, works particularly well for productive uses, because these projects inherently have revenue streams that will support the ongoing operations after funding is phased out by the donor. So that really tailors well into this discussion today in part 2 of the webinar, given the focus on sustainable energy for small businesses. And a great example of this is Solar Freeze, which actually was funded by the Smart Communities Coalition a few years ago. So I'm looking forward to the discussion and looking forward to hearing more. Thanks very much.
Great, thank you so much, Claudia. I think that's a really nice introduction to some of the sort of content topics we're going to talk about today. So if we jump to the next slide, please. Great. So one of our first sort of case studies from today is on sustainable energy for small businesses in displacement settings as part of the NDEV program. And our speaker from NDEV is Florent Eville. So I'll hand over to Florent to talk us through this case study and how energy from enterprises looks from his perspective. Thanks, Florent.
Thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you very much, Claudia, for the introduction to the topic of today's webinar. So as I was introduced, my name is Florent Eville. I'm working for the NDEV partnership, which is a partnership of like-minded donors and co-financers operating in 21 countries in 3 continents. In the next slide, you will see actually our different activities in displacement settings. So if you can move to the next slide, thank you. So we're missing a bit a few countries here, so mainly Bangladesh, Cambodia, Laos, and Bolivia, in which we don't really work. But I'm really glad to see that many things has happened in terms of energy for small businesses in displacement settings. So the report we will present today, but also the report that was briefly presented by Claudia, and that will be available soon. And all of this work like continuing over the years. So very glad to see this coming. So if you can move to the next slide, I will also present a bit what is the SCC, which is it stands for the Smart Communities Coalition, and it's managed, co-chaired by USAID and MasterCard, and to work around like 3 topics: energy, connectivity, and digital tools. Another part of NDEV work is to see what sort of innovative ideas, innovative projects we can have beyond our classic market-based interventions. And I will just give a small snapshot on one of the projects we are implementing thanks to USAID and Power Africa. It's called the Smart Communities Coalition Innovation Fund. So as you can see, it's to work directly with companies who are implementing innovations in displacement settings in Kenya and Uganda, where we used to mostly work through implementing partners, so GIZ itself or SNV, as you can see in the next case studies, to develop the energy markets, but also the business associated with energy access in displacement setting. So can you move to the next slide? So this one is actually taken from the GPA. So it was a work done by the GPA to just try to define what's a conducive market environment in displacement. So based on different pillars, parameters, of course, we can discuss the parameters, but most of what we know from markets in displacement settings, there are a lot of limitations. So, of course, the right to work, to exert certain professions, to own a business, to be able to handle money, to have a mobile phone, to be able to do mobile payments, which are very important in displacement, but even more for energy access, as well as questions related to identity to track this payment. So we all try to overcome these barriers. Yes, you can move to the next slide. And the different reports and studies. And again, I'm really glad to talk about the different studies, but I guess my colleagues, Suzanne Unsel and Bettina, are the people with the dirty hands doing this and implementing these projects both in Kenya and in Uganda. So if you can move to the next slide, since it was presented by Claudia. So what I like in the white paper that we'll publish soon is the different category of direct grant financing and the barrier that exists with one. Market development, where NDEV is mostly focusing on, and also the demand side interventions that for specific categories of businesses and households also, we see it growing also in our portfolio with a few pilots that hopefully we will launch soon. So more to come on this one, but to really target the poorest of the poor or displaced population. So yeah, if you can move to the next slide. So the recommendations from the white paper are very similar to the one we made on the other paper that I will present just afterwards. So we need comprehensive energy and socioeconomic assessments. That's for sure. And yeah, colleagues from SNV, colleagues from GIZ, all the implementers from NDEV are working on this one as we speak, and it's great to see them coming. Same for RBF. RBF could work for simple technologies. Definitely agree on this one. And yeah, the need for interagency collaboration and information sharing is useful, because just as GIZ, just as NDEV, just as anyone, we will not meet the challenge. So sharing this information, sharing it with the companies is fundamental, because we collect this information with public funding and should be used by someone that will implement that will relieve the challenge, so the private sector. So if you can move to the next slide. So again, today we'll present you 2 case studies from a study that we did in 2019 that was led by Practical Action, and all these different organizations, some of them already NDEV partners, some of them not NDEV partners, at different level of organizations. So it was yeah, it was I would say a great group of people. And you would see also, I think, in the 2 case studies, that even if they participated into this research, now their work has evolved thanks to the results of this research. So we had a co-working group, and Practical Action did a lot of interviews with the different case studies, and then we exchanged on the draft and recommendations. So all of this is available on our website. And yeah, we'll now maybe jump 2 slides ahead, just to really give much more space to my colleagues in the field. So again, we define the micro enterprise in displacement setting as different businesses, shops that are owned, run, or managed by displaced people in the displacements, with the 3 dimensions that were explained by Sarah, and again in the bigger HID paper. And if you can go to the next slide, just to be very complete on the different case studies. So we covered a lot of different countries, a lot of different types of projects. So regional projects, locally led projects, and now I will give the floor to Suzanne. I mean, to Sarah first, and then to Suzanne, because I think it's much more interesting than what I can say. But all of this is available on our website. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much, Florent. And we'll post a link to the report that Florent was talking about there, so that everybody can see that and access it. So if we just jump, I think 1 or 2 slides ahead to the NDEV placeholder slide, which is like green, I think. Yeah, perfect. Great. So thank you so much, Florent. And now we'll move into a bit of the detail of the examples from our colleagues Susanna Hansel and Dismas Kazulu. And yeah, thank you so much. Suzanne, over to you to keep the ball rolling on this topic. Thanks.
Yes, great. Thank you so much. Thanks, Florent. Thanks, Sarah and Claudia. Good afternoon, everyone. And yeah, thanks for the opportunity to provide you with an update on where we stand with our market-based energy access project in Kakuma, with a specific focus on micro businesses. And also really nice to have Dismas on this presentation and on this panel as well. Solar Freeze is one of our beneficiary companies within this program. So I will keep it very short for my presentation, so that you hear the really interesting stuff. We can go to the next slide. For those who are not familiar with the market-based energy access project, this project was started at the end of 2017 under the Energizing Development Program in Kenya, in Kakuma Refugee Camp and Kalobeye Integrated Settlement. And our initial focus in the original pilot was really on providing energy access to residential households for cooking and for solar systems. And then we started a scale-up phase at the end of 2019, where we then also included a focus on micro businesses and social institutions. We do provide support through technical assistance to private sector companies to go into the camp and to set up supply chains into the county and develop their local distribution networks for clean energy access products. I can go to the next slide. So initially, the component on residential energy access is actually going pretty well, really well. We have some companies in our portfolio who are no longer asking for grant support. They're just selling on their own by now. However, we found that the situation for micro businesses wasn't quite the same. That was a little bit harder to take off, and still is actually. What we did to really inform our intervention, we ran a survey among micro businesses in the camps and the settlement in the beginning of 2020. So here on the map, you can see the location of the various respondents. We covered about 35% of all businesses. There are an estimated 2,500 businesses active in the camp, anything ranging from small kiosks and dukas to M-Pesa kiosks, phone charging stations, grocery vendors, etc. We can go to the next slide, please. What we found during that, or from that survey, was that indeed electricity access for micro businesses does exist, but the use of that electricity access is quite limited. We found that 54% of the businesses that we interviewed did have electricity access in one way or another. But the businesses were primarily using their electricity access for lighting and phone charging, especially when they had solar systems, and where they were using larger appliances, in particular cooling solutions, then they would primarily rely on diesel from either a generator or an informal diesel mini grid. When we asked them about which appliances they would be interested in, businesses that already had electricity access wanted to upgrade to larger appliances such as fridges or entertainment systems. They were also high on the agenda. And then for the businesses that didn't have electricity access, they were really still wanting to start at the bottom of the ladder. So lighting to extend opening hours, phone charging as a service, and also still cooling solutions was high on their on the agenda as well. The barriers that we found are the ones that we're all aware of. The high upfront costs, lack of information as well was one issue, lack of access to affordable financing and payment plans. Those were the key challenges that were named. We can go to the next slide. So almost 2 years later, following this survey, we're finding that micro businesses still or energy use from micro businesses is still dominated by lighting products, as you can see on the right-hand side here in this graph. This is our current overview of reported sales from our beneficiary companies. But we do see a slow change, especially as we're bringing more companies on board that also have productive use or appliances in their product portfolio, such as, for example, solar-powered sewing kits, barber kits in particular, also PA systems, and then of course cooling solutions. What we're also finding is that the business models are adapting to the local circumstances. So we still have the typical upfront cash payments and pay-goes approaches. Excuse me. But what we're also seeing is informal credit arrangements or private purchase agreements where customers pay per kilowatt hour or a fixed fee to supply appliances with energy as well. We can go to the next slide before I hand over to Dismas. There was quite a lot of interest in cooling solutions. And so we did a deep dive, checking in with businesses that already own fridges or freezers about their cooling systems. And what we found was that businesses paid an average of about 51,000 shilling, so about $460 for a fridge or a freezer solution. And then they would pay about 4,250 shilling per month in fuel payments. Now, if you do the maths, that means that they would pay an average of 8% of the average purchase price per month just to run those fridges. So meaning that over a year, they reinvest the same amount that they paid for the fridge in just keeping it running with the fuel payments. So we have some hope, or a lot of hope actually rests on people like Dismas to provide solar-powered solutions to reduce that running costs. With that, I would like to hand over to Dismas to tell us a bit more about the challenges he's been facing over the past couple of years, but also how things are now looking up and yeah, what his plans are to address these challenges in Kakuma on dual fuel costs in particular. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. So, hi everyone. My name is Dismas Kisilu. I'm the founder and CEO of SolarFreeze, a company that specializes in providing access to solar-powered freezers. So, is my slide on? Yes. So, as Suzanne mentioned, one of the areas where SolarFreeze made a lot of sense as a business and as a product is in Kakuma, northeastern Kenya. So initially, because I'm based in the eastern side of Kenya, through informal meetings, I got to know a lot of people living in Kakuma. For example, through the United Nations young leaders, where they gather young people, and also through the Young African Leaders Program by the USAID. So that's where I got to know a lot of people working in Kakuma and living there, and I had a chance to travel there. So one thing that really strikes you when instantly you visit the place is that it's really, really hot, and you'll tend to drink a lot of water because the temperature is quite high. And because of this, ideally, most people prefer cold drinks and cold water. So that's only for the cold drink side. You can imagine for things like perishable produce like meat, dairy, and even temperature sensitive vaccines and medication, how critical cooling and cold storage is. So as a business, we had a chance to work with the SEC, and that's how we had a chance to get into Kakuma. And it's been an interesting journey, and I'll like to explain more about it. Next slide, please. So Kakuma is a very, and the host community is a very business-oriented community. So well over 160,000 population, and at least over 2,000 businesses. So for us, the initial market segment was to target small to medium-sized businesses, especially restaurants, especially small shops and kiosks, and target them with a 200-liter to 350-liter purely solar-powered unit, and through a pay-as-you-go model. So that was a huge challenge, because for productive use and for especially intense productive use such as freezers, pay-go is something that is non-existent, and there's very little innovation on this technology in the market. Next slide, please. Next. Yeah, so that's our product. We tested this product out. Sorry. Yeah, I can stick to the product. So it's 120 watt solar panel. And the thing that really excites me about it, and what I ask customers why they are interested in our product, is what makes you, because you visit a lot of small and medium-sized businesses, you find that already they have fridges that are quite old and deteriorating. And as Suzanne mentioned, most of them pay a lot of bills in terms of their energy consumption. So you'll notice that power from the grid connected power is unreliable. So every 2 days, you must find a complete power blackout in Kakuma and Lodwar town. And most of these businesses need that energy to store their produce, or to store meat, fresh produce, and to store water, and to store basically things that they can sell and make a profit. So initially, our product was being sold like on cash. So we thought that most people, it will be the the best way to approach this, because a lot of small, like higher, medium-sized businesses have that potential to pay. So the key features that really intrigue them, that when you ask them why they are buying solar freeze, is that it's purely solar powered. And they asked us, we have seen some of them tweaking the product to even add more batteries for other purposes, such as connecting televisions and connecting phone charging stations and stuff like that. So, but through that, we were able to reinvent our unit, and the new solar freeze units, they come with 2 inbuilt USB ports, whereby we give 3 auxiliary bulbs. They can light their shops during the night from that. And also the extra USB can be used to charge their phone. That's as a result of what we saw. And we also have ice packs. I don't know if you can zoom in on the product. So the ice packs, once the unit is fully charged over a period of 24 hours, it can last up to 4 days without any connection to solar or any connection to electricity. So that's a good plus, because it completely freezes and you can either set it to freeze or become a normal fridge. So because most people maybe will want to use the panel for something else, they set it to freeze, and then they get that solid ice, which is something that we are seeing that is very curious from our customers. And so what we offered the product initially is through as a like pay as you go. The initial price was a deposit of 15,000 Kenya shillings. And then over a period of 12 months, you get to subsequently pay every month 5,000 Kenya shillings. So you can skip to the challenges bit. Next. Yes, sure. So I think it was very interesting for us to see the demand that our product had. So I can tell you a good example is Mama Fatima, who she called me once. I think she had about a product from SNV, which was doing a study at a shop about lighting system. And then they told her that Solar Freeze offers access to refrigeration. So she immediately started calling me on Sunday, and by good luck, we had products on the ground that day. So her son went to visit them and was able to give her a report. So we thought that the best payment method for her was the initial 15,000 Kenya shillings, and then subsequent 5,000 shillings over a period of time. But she was very persistent and adamant in insisting that she wants to pay upfront 9 months, and then she can pay the remaining cost of the rest of the 4 months. So that was really curious for us, because we were stunned by the amount of cash moving in the economy and how many people are able to pay. So because of how we are able to be connected to 3 other women enterprises that are also in the same business as her, and some of them are making ice cream. Another one is using the fridges to store sodas. And the other one is generally using it for preservation of milk and stuff like that. So the huge challenges that we faced when we got into Kakuma as a business was that the pay-as-you-go for refrigeration was basically something that we had to come up with and we had to think through. So it took us a really long time to crack this and to actually put the units and to make them run fully on pay-as-you-go. So I'm happy to report that we were able to do that a couple of weeks ago. And now the units that are on the ground are fully pay-as-you-go. And it's something that we hope will scale not only to Kakuma, but other small and medium-sized businesses across Kenya and across East Africa, because we know it's an ideal product for businesses that want to pay for productive use assets over a longer time. So another huge challenge that we face is that obviously last year was very challenging in terms of the supply chain and in terms of getting goods to Kenya. So that caused a major delay. And this affected our timeline, especially with SCC and completing our project. But the good thing is that we got an extension, and even commercially, the product and the project makes sense in Kakuma. So another challenge is that we have a training program where we call it Each One Teach One, Train to Earn, whereby we train refugees and the host community about repair, installation, and maintenance of the solar freeze units. So we had hoped to get at least 60% of our cohort being young women, but we only have 40% because of challenges whereby it's still a field where a lot of women technicians are not in that field. So we want to see how we can increase those numbers and we can incentivize more people to come on board. So providing after sales support, and is something that we are thinking about, as well as partnering with more microfinance institutions to help more small scale businesses afford these units. But I think for us, because the most striking part is that a lot of businesses that are quite commercial are really willing to afford this unit, even without the loan or microfinance institutions. So with the fact that it's pay as you go, most of them don't even try to bargain downwards with the 5,000 per month payment. So an unexpected use of a solar freeze unit that we recently saw is that young lactating mothers, after they have given birth, are using the units to store the breast milk. So it's something that we saw a couple of the units that were being used. The kiosk was right next to the home. So it was ideally like the home is, they have just divided the kiosk and the home is there. So the young mothers around near about the solar freeze unit, so they are using it to store their breast milk once they are expressing. So that was an interesting take about how this unit is being used, and it made us think, how can we make it more safer, or how can we have a product that specializes in that, so that we can at least guarantee hygiene if that is what the community or home use of this productive use asset is what people want to use it for. So we are still thinking about that. But for most small and medium-sized businesses that are very commercial, clinics, we have a unit in a clinic in the host community. We have a unit in a small and medium-sized restaurant. So most of them are keeping up with their payments, and they have also introduced us to more people. So we hope that going forward, we'll be able to surmount these challenges and scale our technology, because we have received a lot of interest. And also we want to serve more people with this technology that makes a lot of sense in this particular area. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to your questions as well as feedback.
Great, thank you so much, Dismas. And for those of you who don't know, Solar Freeze are a finalist in the Ashton Awards. The Ashton Awards have a dedicated humanitarian energy award, and the winner for that will be announced, I think, next Thursday evening. I'll post a link in the chat, so do join for that and learn more about the types of innovations and services that are happening in humanitarian energy enterprise spaces. So if we jump onto our next speaker now, I think it's the following slide with the placeholder for GIZ. Perfect. Then I'll welcome Bettina to speak from GIZ about PUA activities in Ugandan displacement settings. Over to you, Bettina.
That's great, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening to the participants in this webinar. My name is Bettina Walker. I work for GIZ in Uganda in the program for renewable energy and energy efficiency. I lead a team that focuses on the refugee context, implementing two projects, the End of Uganda refugee component and energy solutions for displacement sector. Yeah, next slide, please. So I was tasked to also showcase a little bit one of our approaches around energy kiosks, for instance, where we have productive users of energy that run an energy kiosk, a kiosk that has a solar PV system on its roof, and therefore are a group of young entrepreneurs that are at the same time helping our project approach in ensuring access to high quality energy products and services for the refugees and the host communities members themselves. So we had established in a pilot phase 2 energy kiosks in 2 refugee settlements. It seemed to work quite well with obstacles that I will also partly talk about. And then we copied it already with for the second project, and are in the phase to also expanding it further to other settlement areas. In the first phase, we actually tasked a community group to run this business and to sell energy products and services, as I said. And another group was actually a local NGO. The donor had tasked us to try it out with different management models, and it had different level of successes. And in the meantime, we believe that the business, rather more clearly business approach, is a bit smoother, and therefore we are replicating it more on business-minded community groups, youth groups, for instance. It gives about employment opportunities for 8 to 12 group members on average at the moment. And many times the group members are assigned for different type of departments, as they say. So it also gave an opportunity with the group approach that we could at one point also start mixing refugees and host community members together, running it together. And so far this works also quite well. Next slide, please. I come back to that one, by the way. Yeah. Then here you see one of our oldest energy kiosks. So that's actually a picture. No, go please back if you don't mind. I continue with what I wanted to tell you, but it is the picture with the energy kiosk that I would like you to see. This is an energy kiosk that was established in 2019. It actually started even building a roof for the veranda, but this is a picture which was taken in October, and you see that they are displaying their products on a daily basis. You see that you can estimate that we gave the energy kiosk teams a refurbished container and a storage room, and they received some inventory products such as a fridge, some laptops, and a printer. And they also received some startup materials such as improved cook stoves and solar lanterns and solar home systems, because we wanted to de-risk them a bit and test what they can actually sell in the refugee market and in the host communities. And they also received comprehensive training on business management, customer care, and operation and maintenance for their solar system. I had just put also a bit of a snapshot on what is happening at the moment. So on average, they are able to charge 65 phones. In this particular kiosk, they were chosen to also by another stakeholders to try out to be the service provider of power banks. So they charge the power banks and then rent them out for a benefit for them. They also on average have 6 electrical devices charged on a daily basis. They claim they sell 20 cold drinks on a daily basis. I think sometimes that is, I think on average it is more. And they, because they got the printer, a laminator, laptops, they carry out secretarial services, printing, typing, laminating. And it seems that is an area that also is really needed in the refugee context. And then I have also highlighted that actually when it comes to selling the quality solar lights and home systems, they have only sold 30 pieces this year as per their report, and only 78 improved cook stoves. So when I had, when we had hopes that they would also help us a lot with the improved cook stove sales to the refugee households, this is an area where we are seeing we need to invest a little bit more with them on training up sales agents together with the private sector partners. What you can also see in the left-hand side, is also a sign for a bank. So they have become an agent also for this bank. And this is a payout place now for cash that refugees receive as food assistance. So in this area, the majority receives in the meantime cash as food assistance and not in kind anymore. And here they can go and get cash paid out. What is not so easily seeable or visible in the picture is that the teams also have business in terms of music recording, phone repair, computer training. One group does sales of photography, does photography, and a group does sales in stationary ETC. So they really take this up, and again, also a bit on the talents related in their group. Then most of the kiosks have been in position to pay out salaries. In the NGO, the members that are selling are getting salaries and no performance-based pay. Some kiosks also do performance-based pay. We had, with the next sets of energy kiosks, actually increased the size of the solar system a bit more, so that maybe also additional initiatives can be tried out with plug and play, where you can maybe help a person that is a little further away to also charge maybe overnight or whatever they need. Their business appliances need electricity, but that has not yet been fully implemented. Now we go back to the first slide, or that slide before there. Back, if it's possible. Yeah, another way how we're using productive users of energy, or how we are working together with these energy kiosks, is actually working together with the private sector. If you can find the slide before that picture with the energy kiosk. Thank you. So we're working with partners on a results-based financing, because also with the supply chain to have the energy kiosk receive these quality products, it was definitely an issue. And through the private sector approach with the RDF, we are able to make linkages to the private sector companies. And in addition, we are helping them to establish sales hubs so that they can also sell their products again. So this is a mix of supporting the private sector with also reaching out to the refugee households and host communities. And then we also have link it with the approach of carrying out the awareness campaign alongside the private sector to promote the quality energy products in multiple ways. And that includes also energy products and for productive users. On top of it, what we have to do is working on the enabling environment, because we often see that some of these products that we're also trying to promote through the productive users are given out for free in the refugee context, and that has sometimes distorted the market and is a bit of a risk for our energy kiosks. And therefore, we had worked with the working group on energy and environment on guiding note on when it is good to give out free items and how it is useful to work on a market-based approach in the humanitarian development context. And this guiding note is also now featuring in various paragraphs in the Sustainable Energy Response Plan draft. Yeah, now we can go to the last slide. No, the lessons learned, sorry, thank you. Yeah, so what have we seen and what have we observed? So the management model, I pointed it out already. The NGO approach was showing many more challenges because they were not as swift and couldn't serve their customers as quickly. Procurement processes were taking long, and even cartridges in the printers couldn't be replaced very efficiently. However, we also saw that it brought some opportunities, because the local NGO that does work on energy access now has in the NGO arm also started to use the market-based access for selling of improved cookstoves beyond the energy kiosk. So the replicating effect was higher than in that particular area. We also realized in general, when we're choosing these groups, we have to select it very carefully. I mean, maybe some of you are not necessarily believers in group approaches when it comes to businesses, but so we also see that as a challenge. However, also we feel it was still a good opportunity to make use of an expensive kiosk that more people can actually earn an income from it. And we have seen that it is replicated in smaller energy kiosk versions by other stakeholders in the refugee settlements. We also realized that, we are providing an energy kiosk to these groups, so it's not easy to replicate it at this size, as I said. And we need to find a good mix for entrepreneurial reasons, that we are giving out the inventory and startup materials, but at the same time needing them to have the suppliers and buy these products to then later also sell them in real market-based approaches. The guiding note that I talked about provision of items or selling of items within the refugee context has really opened up the discussions on the market-based accesses in the relevant working groups in Uganda. And so we are feeling that slowly we are having some improvements and we are bearing some fruits. When we talk about the setting up of private sector, the finance, results-based financing, we still see the difficulty that maybe the sales hub is established in a bigger trading center or in a city even. And then the kilometers to then come to the settlements is actually really difficult still. So that needs additional thinking and how to support them best so that they can achieve sales also in the settlements. Especially transport seems to be one of the remaining obstacles for them. And then we do also realize at the moment we focus a lot still on household items for the users of the quality products, but we would like to expand it also for appliances for productive users. So while of course also a solar home system or an improved cook stove of a higher tier can already be used also for as productive user. But we would also like to see other appliances for other on-farm and off-farm users of electricity. So this is something where we are venturing into very soon, but it at the moment still is a gap in the whole of the settlement still. Yeah. Then, of course, with all of that comes also the question always on consumer-oriented financing. So we definitely see that the energy kiosks are also trying out how to provide some of these products on an installment basis, which is even more important when the item is more expensive, which is typically the case for other productive users. And so we need to support them even more in de-risking their customers, because we feel we have de-risked them at the beginning of their business. And now we would like them to also take up this challenge of trusting someone and building mechanisms that are useful for all. Yes, and I think I'll leave it at that. And I say thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, Bettina. And so now we have our panel section. Maybe we can switch off the slides for that for a moment. And if all our speakers can put on their videos, then we'll be able to see each other and have a discussion. So thank you so much for everybody for presenting the different case studies. I think there's so much detail there. I realized we ran a little bit over time, but I really wanted to show the different case studies and the different, details and types of technologies. I see a few questions appearing in the chat, so please do use the chat function and answer those directly, and we'll also have a discussion about some of those topics. In terms of the discussion, I'd like to start actually with the types of energy needs. So I saw Florent actually asked a question about public address systems and PA systems to Suzanne in the chat about the types of like loudspeakers and microphones and businesses around that. But I'd just like our panelists, if anybody would like to jump in on this topic of perhaps unusual businesses. I think we're very used to seeing tailors and barbers and little restaurants and things, but are there other types of businesses that you'd like to draw the audience's attention to in terms of businesses you wouldn't necessarily expect to see in a refugee camp, and of course the types of energy that they're using? Cooling businesses would be an example of this, of course, but I wondered if anybody's got an example case study of a business that they weren't expecting to see, or that a type of business they'd like to draw our attention to and the types of energy they use. Who wants to go first? Does anybody think of an example?
Yeah, what I just maybe want to add, which I still find lovely, because at the moment we are not supporting it directly, except for a project also that uses creative capacity building approaches around energy. Those are things where you use maybe pedal energy, not solar electricity, to make paste. That is, in this case, in the area, the people love, when I was saying this line about groundnut paste or with sesame mixed. And so the pedal paste maker we have, or they have also pedaled juice makers and or grading of cassava to dry the cassava a little bit faster and then to store it easier. So I think that's an amazing way to also encourage productive users with maybe a not so highly expensive method.
Thanks, Bettina. If anybody else has any other examples, please do just jump in. One thing that surprised me a lot when I started doing field work on this topic was that so many of the businesses are electrical, and that was an example of a sort of manual labor energy business rather than an electrical business. But overwhelmingly, the businesses and their energy needs were electrical, actually, rather than cooking needs. There are, of course, cooking needs in enterprise spaces, but that most of the needs are electrical. I think it's important for us to reflect on that. Somebody in the chat is asking a question: are there small appliances or electronic repair businesses? The answer to that is 100% yes. I don't know if anybody from the Kakuma side wants to jump in and provide some examples from Kenya there, but you do see people fixing phones, charging phones. Mobile phone charging businesses are one of the biggest businesses in this space, I think. Suzanne, do you want to do an example? Thanks.
Yeah, no, just to confirm, indeed, don't underestimate also the local capacity in setting up businesses, identifying revenue streams, and certainly repairing electronic devices is one of those. One example, you were saying, yes, most of the needs are electric for sure, but what we're also finding on our clean cooking side is that we're running a behavioral change campaign for clean cooking in Kakuma, and one of the things we're doing there is we set up a stove library, and we found that actually, especially restaurants like to pick up the stoves and try them out. Because it reduces smoke, and they also have a higher ability to pay for these industrially manufactured stoves. So also something to bear in mind, that micro businesses are not just about solar powered appliances, but there's also a clean cooking component, especially in environments where such service provision through restaurants is important. Yeah,
absolutely. And I see a couple of questions specifically about this topic actually for Dismas in the chat. Dismas, people are asking, do you have examples of the sort of types of clients that you have from Solar Freeze and the types of businesses? Obviously, they're using refrigeration technologies, but do you have an example of a client, what type of business they are running with that technology? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So most of our clients are running businesses like shops, kiosks, whereby they are selling cold drinks, sodas, and refrigerated milk. And we also have some clinics which are using our freezers to store temperature-sensitive medication and vaccines. So I think a large portfolio of our client is mostly small and medium-sized businesses like restaurants and shops, and also people wanting to sell cold drinks as a business. And we also have some shops that are selling fresh fish that are using our units. So it's a mix of all these businesses, but the largest ones are kiosk, and I think 70% of them are thereabout.
Great, thank you. And there's actually another question for you, Dismas, on the sort of guarantee mechanisms or timelines that you have for the solar freezers. And are there any reports from your clients of being able to actually increase their business margins, so increase their income, I guess, after purchasing the freezers to help them really grow their business and expand and earn more money? Is that something that you're seeing as the projects start to get running?
Yeah, sure. So we have a 2-year guarantee for our product. Because we also have local technicians that are really close to where their units are. They're less than 1 kilometer or even they are based in that community, so they can be called upon when there's a technical issue. So 2 years is a long time, and we haven't yet had issues. So with regard to increase in income, we automatically saw a lot of them switch off their electric powered fridges, whereby they were paying even as much as $90 in a month to sustain them, to switch to the solar powered one where they're paying $50 per month. And also because of the fact that we give, our units come with inbuilt ports whereby they can put lamps for like at night, so they don't have to pay for the diesel connected electricity. So that's also an added plus, whereby their utilities are fully run on that freezer. And also one of the USB ports can also charge their phones. So we're also seeing that the unit is like a one-stop shop whereby it can be used for lighting, freezing, and also charging phones. So right now, because the curiosity that you have received, we have seen that a lot of people are willing to pay even 9 months in advance. So this shows that clearly there was a need. And with regard to an increase in income, there's an ice cream shop that we spoke to recently, whereby our technician was there. So they told us that they make at least $40 in a day. So right now, because of our solar powered units and the fact that they can light the kiosk at night and also charge their phone, they're at least making 70,000, because this is $70, sorry, a day, because there's more curiosity about the unit and it has a larger capacity. The previous one was 150. So this one that they're using is 350 liters.
Great, thank you. That's such an amazing example of, you know, the difference that these types of technologies and importantly, you know, your types of businesses are making to people's lives, and that they can earn more. You can buy an ice cream in refugee camps. You know, this is something I think that many humanitarians were not expecting when they started to work in this space. I wondered if any of the other panelists, Florent, for example, if you have any evidence of, or examples, anecdotal evidence of income earning potentials of these businesses, and how working through services, energy services, and working through enterprises directly actually helps grow the economies in refugee and displacement settings. If you had any examples of that, or indeed data that you could point to on that. Thanks.
Not so much examples on our side, because we work more at the global level. So what we're trying to do here from Germany is really to steer our colleagues and to help them to find different ways of implementing the project, and also to interest them in the working in displacement setting, because it's a big program, and humanitarian activities is only a very small and tiny part. So my challenge is to interest my colleagues on the topics, but they are the one with the most information.
And I think, Florent, as we have you, I think it's also a wider point that I see in the questions there from Jacob. Hi, Jacob, by the way, good to be in contact again. That whether we feel that humanitarian agencies and actors are really open for business, if you like, with for-profit energy companies and other companies. Maybe you'd like to reflect on that. I would say one thing from our own experience is that it's been enormously difficult to do that, mainly because humanitarian agencies and indeed many NGOs cannot earn money from these types of interventions, and many businesses want loans and want the ability to pay those back. And as a result, it can be really difficult, even when funding and money is available, to get the money to the right place. But yeah, feel free to, you know, offer your own comments on Jacob's question there about the private sector.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely on this one. I think we, as GIZ, as NDEV, we are willing to work with for-profit companies, especially in the energy sector. We find ways to contract with them, either on the grant-based finance or having like result-based finance. So we already work with companies, but it's only the GIZ part of things. And again, GIZ is not a humanitarian agency. Let's say it's development agency going into some of these settings because they have been there for forever and they are protracted crisis. So for us, it's it's open for business, for discussions also, but it's also hard. And also there's also, I think, we don't really speak the same language. So it's part of like efforts needs to be made on both sides to make sure we work together. But it's a lot about the language. But as a program, I think we have a long history of dealing with the private energy sector.
Great. And Suzanne, I see you wanted to come in on that as well.
Yeah, I think once you're actually on the ground and you're engaging with UNHCR, for example, there is quite a lot of positive feedback on the work that we're doing in Kakuma. I think it's a matter of changing perceptions that development programs aren't appropriate in humanitarian settings, but I think we do need to wake up to the reality that when we are especially in protracted settings like Kakuma, for example, or many settings in Uganda as well, that we do need to start looking at the humanitarian challenges also with a development lens. And I do believe that UNHCR is also waking up to that and is actually quite supportive. I think the main aspect is really to keep engaging very closely with the humanitarian agencies to ensure and to reassure them that we still have the best interest of the refugees at heart, because their role is really protection of these vulnerable communities. And I think that's often the concern, that these communities are getting exposed to profit-making entities and therefore suffer in the end. So that's why that really close coordination and collaboration is very important to start a paradigm shift in that space, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And Bettina, I saw you wanted to come in on this as well. I'd also like to ask you, Bettina, to add to your comments about the enabling environments, and what is your experience with that? And are some places, especially some refugee camps, more open for business than others? We often work in the usual suspects, Kenya, Uganda, etc. What is your experience with the enabling environment, on top of what you wish to say about this particular topic as well? Thank you.
Thank you too. So I definitely would like to highlight that the policy area in Uganda is very conducive, and actually under the Comprehensive Refugee Response Framework, the government works very closely and very actively on the private sector engagement plan. So this is a document that they're working on to ensure that the private sector is actually coming on board even more than it has been the case. In the steering group of the CRF, the private sector has the representatives present. It is embedded in our sustainable energy response plan for refugees and host communities, as well as, the private sector engagement, as well also in the livelihoods approaches. So it's a clear commitment that the private sector is needed and wanted, as per the additional mandate to protection of self-reliance, making these refugees self-reliant, and the host communities as well. And what we still see then, that they don't always fit. So how should they engage with the Office of the Prime Minister? Usually when you're an NGO, a local CBO, or whatever, you tend to register. But for companies, you don't usually register. So how do you do this exactly? That mechanism that was doing work where went right, now work in the private sector is also implementing its activities. It's a bit more straightforward when they have grants or also part of a consortium. Then usually that's how the registration process then works for all of them. But yeah, I would say, when it is more also on their initiative, sometimes they don't even know how to officially enter the refugee settlement as such. But yeah, so I would just want to say, indeed, we have this enabling environment where policy documents point and request for the private sector to engage. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bettina. And I realize we're already 10 minutes over. So I think we will now sort of jump back to our last slide, which is slide 44 on the next steps. And I would really like to thank our panelists so much. I'm sorry we didn't have time for more discussion. I would also really encourage all the attendees to reach out directly to read the resources that we put in the chat, and to reach out on these projects to really start to understand what are the opportunities for market-based programming, and what are the opportunities to work with energy entrepreneurs and energy the energy needs of businesses directly. So Ariel, if you could just share the screen slides again for that next step slide, then I'll just recap there. And in the meantime, let me thank our panelists so much for the discussion today and all the presentations. It's been really, really useful and amazing to hear your experiences. So thank you. This last slide, which is the last one I'll just talk about for 1 minute before we close, is the next steps for this topic within the GPA and the wider community. So obviously here on the left of the diagram, you see that we've had our opening webinar today. On the 17th of November, we invite all of you to the Humanitarian Energy Exchange Network, the HEAN meeting, which will have a further discussion about this topic within field practitioner communities. And then from January to March, there'll be a 3-part webinar series with our colleagues from Selco Foundation, really starting to dive into this issue of energy for livelihoods, energy for productive uses, energy for businesses in displacement settings. And so we'd invite you to join that through the Energypedia webinar series, and we'll send links out for that as well. And then towards the middle of next year, we'll start to have an evaluation about whether we really need a small task force on this area. Obviously, there are a lot of people working on household cooking, on energy for community facilities, but there isn't a dedicated group working on energy for enterprises. And so if you'd like to be involved in that, or you see a real need for a sort of task force coordinated by the GPA on this topic, then please do reach out to us at energy@UNITAR or any of the people you see on this panel, and we'll take that forward into 2022. So if we jump to the next slide, perfect. Please find all the resources and all the information we said already during the chat on these links as well. And thank you so much. I'll close here so that we don't run over time further. But thank you, everybody. Thank you to our speakers and our participants. And hope you have a nice rest of the day thinking about energy for enterprises. So I'll close there. Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.